Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ITSP Magazine. Knowledge is power, now more than ever.
Marco.
Sean.
Today I feel a lovely shade of purple.
Yeah. Purple is a good color.
Purple is a good color. And then I feel majestic as well at the same time.
It is. It's a royal color. As a matter of fact, it's been used, I think, by kings and royal all over history. And I heard there is a knight in that color as well.
There is a knight. We've actually spoken to the team who've, I don't know if crafted is the right word, but have launched the Purple Knight upon us to help us guard against all things bad in Active Directory. Funny enough, the key, which holds the keys to our kingdom in many cases. So enough of the silly analogies. We had a great conversation with the team at Semperis, talking about Purple Knight a while back, and around the launch of that offering, and a lot has changed, not just with the solution, but in the landscape and the use of the technologies that run who we are, what we are, and what we do within business, in the form of Active Directory and ultimately Azure AD as well. So I want to welcome Dan and Guido to the show. Two new folks from Semperis joining us. Good to meet you. Good to see you. Thanks for being on, guys.
Thanks for having us.
All right.
Gonna be a good chat.
How about we start with presenting, or let you present yourself here, and then we will present also the knight after you, though.
Thank you.
Let's start with you, Dan.
Well, appreciate you having us. My name's Dan Lattimer. I am the Area Vice President for the UK here at Semperis. I've been in and around cybersecurity for a very, very long time, been in and around identity for a long time, and leading the business here for us in the UK.
Guido.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for inviting me to the call. Guido Grillenmeier. I'm the principal technologist for Semperis in EMEA, supporting most of our largest customers and in general our technical community. And that especially is around security evaluations, utilizing our tools such as Purple Knight and others.
Love it. So let's take a look back, if you will, even a few years. I'd say, well, there's no question cloud has become mainstream, right? Everybody's transforming to a cloud, many clouds, hybrid clouds. And with that goes if they didn't start in the cloud, they have the transition from on-premises to the cloud. And one of those critical components is Azure, or Active Directory more specifically. And so kind of talk to me about some of the things you're seeing there from some of your customers. How are those transformations going? How are those transitions going? What's kind of changed in the past few years from that perspective?
Yeah, there's a lot of change. There's always change in IT, but the same mistakes get made. I think a lot of the time we look at the future and look at these new technologies, new ways of doing things, and think that's going to fix everything. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of value to it, but the old problems still persist. Most organizations will look at understanding who their users are and what they should have access to, and building policies around that. Normally, that information is held within Active Directory. It's an old solution. It's been around for a very, very long time. It was built for allowing things to connect to other things quite easily. That problem doesn't go away by just moving to the cloud or doing any of these kind of zero trust programs or anything along those sort of lines. The problem you find is that moving to the cloud, you're just bringing bad technical debt with you. We're moving through to AWS is a scenario that we see quite often. But what does that system connect back to understand who the users are and what the application should connect to? So you find this long tail of technical debt being dragged along into all these modern areas. So we're working with a lot of organizations to help reduce that technical debt and make that more easier to manage.
Let's also add that other aspect that's just a reality that companies face, especially those that have been around for a while. They started in the on-prem world and are then in the middle of a transformation towards cloud technologies. And those that are bound into the Microsoft ecosystem, often through Office 365 and Teams and whatnot, they are often then also considering Azure, and with that Azure AD as the next step forward. Now, the big thing that they are faced with that is an application migration to modernize the applications to actually utilize those new directories, since the name Active Directory and Azure Active Directory are similar, but the underlying technology for authentication of applications and users, absolutely not. So that's why it's the old applications that many businesses run on and rely on for years to come that keep them from actually, making the move away from the on-prem Active Directory for quite some time into the future, until the last application has been modernized and they've been migrated away from that.
It's like running away from your problem, but you put them in the carriage with you. I use carriage because I'm already in the middle age here. As soon as you say at night, I go in a different world. But the world is the present world. So there is that metaphor of the knight that defends the castle. But there is a different castle, obviously, even if I am on the website now and I do see there is castle with flags, and I'm excited to get to London soon and see something of that nature there. And then we'll introduce your presence of InfoSecurity London. But tell me about the fact that how it has been evolving since the first conversation that we had in 2021, which I believe is when it was launched. And what new tricks have this knight learned?
I'll be happy to take that, because I was there when it was originally launched, and I was just as excited as our product group for finally getting it out into the market. And I'm telling you, that was a big moment, because it was, of course, our first freely available tool that was really there to help the community to understand the security posture of their Active Directory, the on-prem Active Directory. At that time, we only, quotes, had something like 35 checks that we were validating, basically vulnerabilities, so-called indicators of exposure that we were testing against in the on-prem Active Directory. Today, for the on-prem Active Directory, we've got 105 tests that are being performed. So almost 3 times as many. We've released it on a not quite monthly basis, with new updates that either we researched from our research team, or we found from other publications, and then made tests to match those publications' vulnerabilities to help our customers understand even more of what other risks are out there. Lots of focus on certificates, because certificates have increased in usage by the cyber attackers to get to domain admin credentials. So that has been a focus in the past. Lots of changes there. And if I hadn't mentioned that before, the addition of Azure Active Directory checks as well in the same product, also for free, for which, of course, a particular account is required in that Azure AD tenant, but the usability is the same, easy to use, very powerful in its feedback to the operator to understand what are the weak spots and what do I need to take care of. And especially between the two, because you might have a bridge between the two that you want to avoid.
And Dan, I suppose there's a lot we could say that many people listening will say, well, I already know that. I'm dealing with that as we speak. And just one example of, I think somebody mentioned the use of Teams. Guido, you mentioned Teams. Is it possible for an organization to have on-premises AD for all their legacy stuff, and then implement a new feature that requires something like, let's say Teams, that requires Azure AD, and now they have this hybrid environment. So assuming something like that's possible, you can clarify in your response what that might look like. People recognize whatever their scenario is, but what are some of the things that they might miss in terms of, well, now I need to adjust my on-premises to account for this, and as I move or implement the Azure AD stuff, I need to consider these things because they don't look like the on-premises stuff, and I might not understand how this environment works. There's probably a lot in there, but if you can start to unravel that picture, that'd be great.
So there's a couple of things here. So when someone is moving through to Azure, they still have to take some form of feed from their on-premise Active Directory. It's going to be very, very rare that you create something completely independent all on its own, because how is it supposed to connect back to the rest of your environment? So generally, if someone is moving to hybrid, they're still dragging some of that historical Active Directory configurations, etc., with them. The big challenge you find is that AD has been around for a long time. Organizations go through acquisitions and divestitures all the time. The user base is forever changing. Applications are coming and going. Your settings and your policies are updated constantly. It's very difficult to keep track of all of that, manage all of that in an effective way. And moreover, the skill gap around Active Directory is increasing year in, year out. So trying to find people that have the knowledge and the context of your environment and then be able to do that type of work in a relatively consistent manner is challenging. Also, being able to take all that information and do something useful with it is the next battle. So we've tried to make that as simple as possible to do that analysis for our customers, give them that information, and then give them some real world actionable insight of how to actually tackle some of these problems and reduce that risk, without having to be an expert with an Active Directory to be able to achieve all that.
Maybe I can add on that a little bit, because I think it's good to have an example. What Dan just mentioned is totally right. You're not starting from scratch because you want to use the same user base. You know, it's your user that exists just once. It's a warm body, yeah, and that warm body, ideally, most companies work that way. Doesn't want to re-authenticate in 20 different places. That's where single sign-on comes in. So you want to actually sort of connect the accounts in the Azure world and the on-prem world. And that connection is happily done through Microsoft technologies such as Azure AD Connect. There's also the Cloud Connect. That's basically just one other way to synchronize your on-prem Active Directory into the cloud. And multiple mistakes can be made just there. Yeah. Starting with synchronizing your admin accounts from on-prem to the cloud and making them admins in the cloud. And that's the bridge that I mentioned. You basically, you reach in one, and then suddenly both environments are easily compromised. But another example that we find all over the place, and that's a warning that our Purple Knight tool would always pop up with, is the fact that there's a powerful account that you, through this syncing, have granted high privileges in your on-prem Active Directory. And that's the service account that is used to sync those two worlds. And that account has the power to read everything in the directory, including password hashes. It's heaven on earth for an attacker to go after that account, because then you can also grab the so-called KRB TGT hash. Might be too technical, but it's basically the key hash that an AD requires to generate Kerberos tokens. And if you have that, you can generate your own. That's the golden ticket that hackers love to create. They're independent of your domain controllers then. But companies often deploy that system on a weak server, on a not well-protected server. It's just another server. Although that server where that account is on must be protected like a domain controller. And those are the warnings that we give with our tooling to make people aware, hey, this is critical. You have to consider how you manage this system, how you manage this account that has high privileges. Be aware of it. And once you're aware of a risk, you can actually do something about it, or you can choose to accept it. But ideally, you know how to handle it better.
Got it. I'm going to let Sean go in some more technical question, but I'm thinking from a business perspective to get the big picture. So I'm going to go with Dan. We're in the elevator in the tower of the castle, and you have just the elevator pitch available for me. Like in few steps, why should I, as a business owner or a CISO, even come and say, okay, not only because it's free, but because it's actually accomplishing A, B, C, and D, I want to give it a go. So, go.
So I think that the reality is regardless of what your objective is as a business, there is going to be some form of technology that supports that, and processes that support that, and applications that support that have dependencies. Active Directory is going to be one of those dependencies. We've had scenarios where organizations build huge multi-million-pound programs of work to protect this key customer-facing application, and forget that Active Directory can just log straight in. So it's there in some way, shape, or form. It's going to be supporting whatever it is you're trying to achieve, and ignoring it introduces risk, removes the likelihood of you being successful, because people make mistakes and people are actively targeting it.
Okay, good enough. Thank you.
Not for me.
Not for Sean.
It was good.
Sean is walking out of the elevator and he's going to keep asking you questions.
That's right. I'm following you all the way back to the office or the castle. No, because I think there's, let's face it, IT and security is not an easy job, right? Very complex environments. You mentioned the skills gap, Dan. Tough to stay up on top of things. Not many people entering this world want to go back and look at on-prem, right? They'd rather look at the funny or the fun, shiny new stuff in the cloud. So you have that further exposure, if you will. So I want to kind of paint the picture of where all the exposures might sit, because that's the first part, right? It's identifying those spots, and then potentially an active attack on those spots is the next piece to look at. But let's look at the exposure piece. I don't know, Guido, you want to touch on that? Where are those parts that need to be?
Absolutely. I think, you've just mentioned the people aspect of it. Active Directory, the on-prem Active Directory is no longer sexy for young folks to learn. You want to work in the cloud and do the new stuff. But it is, because of its lack of attention and its age, we're 2023 now, this technology is easily 25 years old. It was released in 2000, but of course developed years before that, has come of age, of course, and it wasn't designed for the attacks of today's world, and that makes it weak partially because it's open. It's very open from a read perspective. I always say it's open like a barn door, because it's true. Microsoft chose the path of openness in the design of Active Directory security, that everybody, and that includes every user in your company and every machine in your company, has plenty of read permissions in the directory. And that, of course, also includes any intruder that makes it into your corporate network. As soon as they have a step inside, through phishing mail, through some other malicious website, whatever people click, and believe me, there's always some way in, through some mechanism. We hear it every day. There is an intruder in your network, and that intruder, he or she, has plenty of permissions to just do reconnaissance against your Active Directory. That's exactly what they're going after, because when they find weaknesses in that, and I've just mentioned the DC sync rights of that highly privileged account, if they find it and it's on a not well protected machine, hey, you go after that machine. There are accounts that are highly permissioned. You can find all of that by default, that are easily so-called Kerber roastable, that have a service principal name, and basically very attractive method for intruders to grab hashes and basically elevate the privileges. Why? Why are they even after Active Directory? It's because it's not just used for you to manage your users and servers, but to actually grant permissions to data, to grant permissions to business applications. So if I hack Active Directory, if I compromise it and become the domain admin of it. That's always the goal from any attacker that's inside your network. If they get that far, then all other systems are easily breached, because it's actually not a break-in anymore. It's a login, because they just grant themselves permissions through group memberships. They add themselves, might not actually be the domain admin that has permissions to the financial data, but a different group. Not so difficult to find out once you're in. And that's why Active Directory is the perfect pathway to bring you harm. Of course, also really good to manage your environment. But the point is, from the intruder's perspective, that centralization of identity has given them power. And of course, that same power would exist for your cloud applications if they are then able to attack your cloud tenant, your Azure AD tenant, no different from the on-prem AD tenant. And that's why you want to protect both of them, so that the intruder can hopefully not reach their goal. And ideally, you are more, through proper hardening, through proper tooling, better protected in your AD, so that the intruder can't get further and then chooses a different victim. That is your goal.
Yeah, with great power comes great responsibility, and I'll get to the monitoring, detection, response piece in a moment, but I want to stick with the assessment, because I think we have an opportunity here, of course, to do something good before it becomes a problem. What I want to understand from you is kind of where this fits into the operations of IT and security. I guess in the old days, you might have an AD admin that's responsible for this stuff, and perhaps they intersect at some levels with the rest of IT and systems and networking and apps, but fairly self-contained, right? They own that. With the shift to DevOps and everything in the cloud, pretty much, or most of the stuff in the cloud, responsibility for what gets built and how it gets deployed and ownership has become very blurred alongside the technology as well. So how does an organization leveraging Purple Knight and Semperis get a view of what's going on in the context for where the right person or team owns taking action on it before it becomes a problem?
Yeah, that is a $1 million question. It's not always easy to answer.
Right.
You kind of hit the nail on the head. It sometimes will fall in between infrastructure, sometimes will fall into identity, sometimes will fall into security, and sometimes it can be into very weird and wonderful places that no one could ever expect and predict. And this also furthers the challenge you have. Operationally, you have people making changes, and you have suppliers making changes. Sometimes suppliers manage it as well. We've had a scenario a couple of days ago where someone said, a change got made. We asked all the suppliers, who was it? And everyone said, wasn't me. This has now moved from an operational problem to a security problem. It was a legitimate, someone just didn't want to make a mistake. The reality is helping clients working through this and actually exposing some of that risk and issue allows us to, work further down that vine to find out who actually is the person responsible. It is always a challenge to try and figure out exactly who is responsible. Do they have an operational mindset associated with this, or is it a security mindset? And it's always trying to tie the two different camps together, the operational and security teams together, because ultimately that's the only way that these problems get fixed, because it's both problems.
Yeah. Interesting dynamics. Yep.
I'm gonna take it here because I'm thinking, and I'm kind of tease on that. We will meet again soon at Info Security Europe in London, and plenty of castle there. Excited about it, but the conversation there. I think they choose a great theme for the event, which is rethink the power of info security. And when I think about that, I think about it's not just to protect, but it's also exactly empower, right? The power, allow to do business. And I think the Active Directory is perfect because you can't block everything. Otherwise, you block the business. So that is a really important observation to make, but also it adds values to the business nowadays. The conversation is about if you're a secure business, you are a more valuable business. And I would love to hear from you, maybe maybe Guido, some case study of clients that really have empowered themselves to do better business because of Semperis and because of the tools that you have.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no names that I can mention particular, of course, but I've had plenty of, first of all, we as a company have received tremendous amount of feedback from the community from our tool that has been downloaded and used many tens and thousands of times already. And of course, that is growing because, we're releasing new capabilities, new features. But specifically, I've worked with quite a few clients that were simply not aware of their, let's say, security posture of their Active Directory and the risks that they would face if an intruder made it into the network, gets to the corporate network layer, and basically is then able to easily compromise the Active Directory. That visibility wasn't there. Now, that alone has helped them to realize that they needed to reprioritize. Yeah, that alone was they were able to realize, okay, with, let's say, additional I wouldn't say push, but additional hints at, well, think about, do a dry table run as to like, what are the actual dependencies on this technology? Do you still have critical business apps that you utilize in your environment that depend on Active Directory, yes or no? And too many had to answer absolutely yes. If this wasn't working, if this was taken down and breached, we couldn't do our business. So after going through that exercise, and we had things like, I mentioned their Kerber roastable account that you can do something about by making passwords of those service accounts much larger, much harder, much longer, much harder to attack, like not in the lifetime of normal machines. Let's disregard quantum computing here for a second, because that's a totally new risk in trying to crack passwords. But in the normal systems, it would take years to crack those longer passwords, or old configurations that were left over from some old web applications with unconstrained delegation turned on. Again, don't want to go into the technical details too much, but it helped them to realize, hey, that's a risk. That machine, we're actually no longer using that app. We were able to unconfigure a lot of their risky issues and basically go through this point by point to actually make them more secure. Not just feeling more secure, but also being able to prove to management their security improvements over time through multiple runs of the PK report. Now, often these customers then realize they need more for their Active Directory protection. Of course, we have professional tools, commercial tools to help them beyond that. But they're thankful for all the wealth of information and expertise they're already getting with a free tool.
And I mean, great examples. And it just leads me to believe, and I'm going to encourage everybody to either connect with you in person in London or follow up with you after, because there's so much more that we can cover here in this conversation. But one of the things that I think Purple Knight does that is critical for an organization who hasn't really looked at this in depth is the indicator of compromise. And I don't know if this is the right way to look at it, but we talk about like an intrusion detection and prevention and endpoint protection. We look at false positives, right? Where things look like they're real attacks, and in fact they're not. So teams spend a lot of time tracking it down. It's not really an issue. Here, there's a potential for false negative, right? Where it looks like a legitimate login, looks like a legitimate access, yet in fact it's something bad taking place. So how do you help organizations, one, determine if there's something there that's bad already, and then ongoing look for activities that look legitimate but really aren't?
Do you want me to take that? I'll be happy to give you a few thoughts on that. Dan can expand. You're touching on a very difficult point because, of course, first of all, Purple Knight is a tool that you spin up in the moment, and then you check the environment, and what we can find is traces of things that intruders have left behind, such as Mimikatz DC Shadow. It's clear signal of, ooh, this is nothing that you do every day in your operations. If there is traces of that found in your AD, that's typical in an intruder trying to persist in your environment. Now, often the attack is, of course, happening not inside Active Directory. It's happening on the endpoint, where companies haven't done the greatest in doing a proper tiering model that hinders a domain admin to log on to a normal end client. That's how most environments are breached. And then from that endpoint, the intruder simply steals the credentials. Be it pass the hash, pass the ticket, doesn't matter. He becomes the domain admin and doesn't actually change anything in your AD. And you need to figure out by what they're doing if it is a legitimate task or not. And that's where commercial tools come into play. That's not where Purple Knight can help much. Purple Knight can find specific changes that are suspicious, that shouldn't have happened. Also, injection of SID history is also a good example that an intruder might have tried by, using the SID of a domain admin group, of the domain admin group, injecting it to a lesser suspicious normal account. That normal account becomes a domain admin and you don't see it anywhere. Not in the domain admin group, hasn't changed, etc. So there are ways that we can find what intruders have done with your environment, and Purple Knight even helps there. But the act of the change we can only capture with active components in the environment, and that's again where a commercial directory services protector tool comes in.
And that's the beauty of being able to make an audit on the spot, like real time, not what was 6 months ago. That doesn't help me much. I mean, it does help, better than nothing, but So we're getting to the end of this conversation, but we'll meet again soon in London. I mentioned a few times at the Excel London, there is Info Security Europe. It's the 20th, 21st, 22nd of June. And I know you guys are there. So then you want to make a call to action to invite people to come and visit you guys to your booth where you are, and what they can learn there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, the stand is E62. We'll be there all 3 days. I'm more than happy to help, give you any and all guidance we can around Active Directory, securing it, and making your life a bit easier when managing it as well.
That's the key, I think.
Everyone wants an easy life.
Right?
Easy button.
Right.
Fix it for me.
More tech.
That's right. Well, I mean, as things become more complex, it'd be nice to know that we have some help from folks like you and technologies to help people like you help us help our teams be more successful. Great conversation. Great to hear things are progressing and the growth of Purple Knight continues. And super cool stuff. And I'm excited to see you both in London along with the rest of the team, and hope to meet some folks there as well. Of course, we'll be chatting with you live on site to kind of get your feel for what's going on and what are some of the conversations you're having there. So we encourage everybody to stay tuned. Yep. And we'll include links to Purple Knight and Semperis and your profiles. So, and then the link to your stand so people know where you are. So those listening and watching, you can grab all that information in the show notes. And Marco, I'm still feeling royal and purple.
Good. I'm excited.
AD at this point.
I'm excited to get on the big bird, metal bird, and get to London meet a lot of interesting people there. Everybody interested and with the same objective, which is to make our business more secure. So looking forward to that. And for everybody, stay tuned. There is a page all dedicated to InfoSecurity Europe coverage on ITSP Magazine, and there'll be many more stories straight from the floor as well. We'll get creative there. So stay with us. Dan, Guido, thank you so much again. Take care.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you learned something new and this story made you think, then share ITSP Magazine with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our columns. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. You can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society.